Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another university segment of REIMAGINE 2020 Virtual Blockchain Conference. I'm Ashley Meredith, and I am the head of education over at MouseBelt Blockchain Accelerator. I'm really excited for this conversation because it combines two of my biggest interests right now, blockchain technology and philosophy. Also here today is Tyler Olson, and he's the university program director at MouseBelt. He and I actually studied philosophy together at San Francisco State University, and the conversations that we've had around philosophy and blockchain inspired me to start a website called www.blockchainphilosophers.com and start working on an ethics of blockchain course. And through all of these conversations and building this site, we've been able to meet lots of other people who are interested in the philosophical underpinnings of blockchain. And one of them is here with us today, Professor Federico Viola. He's at the Catholic University of Santa Fe in Argentina, and he's also an investigative assistant at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council in Argentina. So, hi, Federico. How are you? What are we talking about today?
Hi, thank you for this invitation, for this opportunity to discuss with you guys and all the audience and the people. I was always an enthusiast of technology, and since I was a child, I was always around with computers, and then I became sort of philosopher. So I started also to study philosophy, and I was always trying to think my reality and everything what I like, and I started since some years ago to thinking about this new reality of internet at first time, and what that means, and the ethical and political implications, and then now with this new innovation that comes with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and I started to think about all this, and yeah, I'm trying to get some reflections and I summarized something that I would like to share with you and discuss together. So if you want, I can start sharing my screen. And yes, there we go. So the main idea, so is for me that blockchain means ultimately a reality building machine. So what I was trying to say is, so I have three main ideas that regarding blockchain, this new technology is decentralization, disintermediation, and the blockchain as a reality building machine. I will try to explain these three main ideas. So I think that we are living in a centralized world and culture. That was also in the political level, the idea of globalization maybe also. We live in a paradigm of a governance and democracy where power is not distributed, not shared, but transferred from a majority of individual to one individual or small groups of policymakers, politicians. And power becomes centralized and it flows vertical from up to down. Centralization means also concentration. It's always as if is there always this tendency to build a center. that is also concentration of power, and therefore, and the consequence is standardization. Central powers tends to control and to impose order to society through global forms of value and institutions. So my idea is also that globalization means standardization. And standardization leads to uniformity. And because of that, we have, well, there's a clear tendency to one form, for example, to practicing medicine. In Western society, we have, it's very difficult to talk about, for example, alternative form of medicine. We have one form of governance. In the indirect democracy, it's very difficult to think other ways to governance or to live in society. We have also just one form, one unique form of a legal system, a Western system of law, and there is the tendency to globalize this legal form of system. And also there is a tendency, a strong tendency to one unique economic and commerce systems. So one idea of what economic is. This is the profit maximization. This idea, I think that leads to a paradox. We only have the freedom to be like everyone else. It's like a tendency of everybody have to be the same. But we are not allowed to be different. To be different is to be excluded from the system. The internet, as in the beginnings of the internet, internet begins as a distributed and collaborative system. But it was only useful to transfer data and information, meaning that it doesn't change the idea is that doesn't change the economic and political paradigm, but it intensifies and amplifies it. So this paradigm that I described of centralization was intensified and amplified by the first era of internet. And that is, and the result is Internet 2.0 that imitates the centralizations of powers, imitate our current socioeconomic political reality. But there is a question, though, that have to be posed. Is there an alternative between pure collectivism and atomization? I think that there is an opposition between centralization and atomization. As I think that there is a relationship between centralization, and the opposite is atomization of society, pure individualism, and we cannot think but in this form of binary form of thinking, or collectivism or individualism or atomization of society. But I think that there are other forms and I think that blockchain is the expression of a desire to go beyond this this logic of collectivism and individualism. I think that blockchain is the possibility of thinking unmediated relationship. That is, disintermediation is the possibility of unmediated relationships between each other. And my idea is that this technology imitates or represents a symbolic unmediated level which sort of regulates every interaction which we have in our private intimate level. There is indeed an intimate dimension of interaction with others which escape to institutional norms and laws. It is but not the private life opposite to the public life. It is a dimension which lies beyond to all public-private dimension, unreachable, which has no opposite. I'll call this unmediated level, this direct level, the ethical level. My idea is that this technology tends to imitate, to express this unmediated, this direct level of existence, which I call ethical level. With ethics, I don't mean a set of moral norms which rules existence. I just mean a level of intersubjective interactions where the other has an intrinsic value, where the other concerns me and I am responsible for him, for her, for it. It's not just with the other human, but also with nature or with every entity in the universe. It's not just, and this level is not just a trustless level, but also a truthless level. Because in ethical or in direct interaction with others, we don't need trust and we don't need truth. This kind of interaction, like if we can think, for example, in family or with friends, there is a point where trust is not necessary because we are together, we in a meeting with the other, trust is not necessary. And so this infrastructure, this peer-to-peer infrastructure, foster cooperation, collaboration, reciprocal growth. These ideas of cooperation, collaboration is, I think that it's ever present in this level, in this ethical level, in this unmediated level of existence. It's not just a win-win situation where we cooperate because we are going to win, but it's just natural cooperation. For example, Ubuntu, it is very interesting that one of the most successful projects from the Linux technology is Ubuntu, which is a Debian-based distribution being named after the African philosophy of Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, or humanity towards the others. So the most interesting is that Ubuntu is not just a philosophy, it's not just a mere doctrine, but it's a form of life. And there is also this link between technology and this practice of being with others beyond a mere collaboration because everyone's win. So in fact, society is not the mere aggregation of monads, of individuals. It isn't the free assembly of particular individuals who live side by side with others individuals struggling for existence and trying not to kill each other. As Johann Benkler says, so from Harvard Law School, Joachim Benkler shows that the main characteristic of human animal is not rivalry, it's not opposition, but cooperation and collaboration. Of course, this is not the more evident, apparently, but if you look carefully, this idea isn't that hard to conceive or to imagine. Why does the other concern me? That is the question. We are, though, as Western civilization used to believe that we are enemies one from another, and everyone has to struggle for his own existence at the expense of the others. Nevertheless, it is very important to raise again the problem of community. It is, as Emmanuel Levinas says, is a French philosopher, it is extremely important to know if society is in the current sense of the term is the result of a limitation of the principle that men are predators of one another, as Hobbes says, or if, to the contrary, it results from the limitation of the principle that men are for one another. We can say it's the limitation of society, is the limitation of trying to kill the other, or is the limitation of love? So, reality building machine. I think that the actual progress which the internet of blockchain means consists of a leap which goes from a technology which copies reality, which copies each entity of the world, to another one which produces it. So which is a technology which produces the world. It's not just transform world in data or in information. It's not anymore the case that software eats the world. With this technology, it throws it up, it produces the world. That's the actual revolution. If blockchain is a truth machine, that is so because it builds reality. So the internet of value implies that the internet is no longer a mere tool for transmitting data related to a certain fact in the world, but rather that it begins to be the very instrument to produce effect as such. Within a blockchain, it's not just that a piece of information is transferred, which describes a determined transaction, a determined state of affairs. What the blockchain designates is rather the event itself of transacting, and therefore produces a new situation in the world performatively. So language is not, and here I have to clarify what performativity means. So that was a category which was introduced by Austin, Shang Austin, a philosopher of language, and from there comes this idea of performativity. So the idea is that language is not a static system, but a dynamical force, a practice. When you say something, you are doing something. When you're greeting somebody, you're not transmitting information, you're doing something. Also, this idea comes from the sophists and from rhetorics and the ancient Greek and Rome. So I think blockchain has this performative power over reality. It is not its mere expression or copy like traditional internet, but is but its production itself is the production self of the world, the very production of the reality. While traditional internet copies reality, the internet of blockchain, the internet of value, produces it. Blockchain is language in action. Every time we say something, we are doing something. And many times this doing means producing something. Transacting, the encounter between two individuals, is the very productions of new entities in the world, I would say. Thank you. That is the summary of my ideas. So
Great.
I'm open to discussion.
Yeah. If you don't mind, we could probably go back kind of step by step through these concepts in a conversational way, just to see if I'm understanding you correctly. We'll just go ahead and stop the screen share. So from the first point, you're making a distinction between Internet 1.0, Internet 2.0, and what we all kind of understand blockchain as being Internet 3.0. And it seems like you're saying that the intention behind a peer-to-peer network is decentralization, right? There's supposed to be a freer flow of information, but the way that that technology is set up now, it tends towards centralization, and it starts to just replicate the power structures that already exist. And I think an easy way for maybe our viewers or listeners to understand that, a very clear example could be you know, what's kind of happening with Facebook and the interference that happens in elections, and how we see a magnification of power and privilege with this tool of the internet instead of a destruction of it. Is that a good example for people to think about?
Yes. I think that always prevail this, always is there this tendency to centralization. This technology, this new technology has is there the possibility of decentralization, but we can another time go into centralization. I would say the danger is always there, because we as human beings are built, I don't know, with this force to centralization. And that is also not just wrong or good, it's just the fact that we are. And that's always the problem and the challenge. But I think that this is like a new, a fresh start. We have again this possibility of decentralization, but it's up to us, it's up to humanity, or in this case of developers and people in the business, to keep in mind that, or at least to pose the question: are we just struggling or are the others just enemies, and we have to centralize power to get or to evolve in a centralization of power, or a very powerful corporation just to have the power to, I don't know, to defend ourselves from the other? Or the question is, are we prepared to collaborate? Because as this philosophy of Ubuntu says, I am because you are. So we are together in this, and we can do better, a better world. I think that if we maintain this question, that regulates the form that the structure of this new technology builds.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're able to come on and kind of explain these concepts. And encourage, the leaders in the blockchain space to think about this. One thing that I heard 2 years ago when I first started getting into this was a blockchain for social justice panel, and they talked about it was the first time I had ever heard anyone talk about the negative impacts of blockchain on potentially increased surveillance on communities that already receive increased surveillance, especially in the US, people of color, et cetera. And one of the speakers said, decentralization is a spectrum. It's not a particular blockchain that we could argue about, is it decentralized or not? It's really, is it decentralized enough for me to want to use it if I have these concerns like the ones that you're talking about? So encourage anyone listening and anyone in the blockchain space to really think about that question. And another barrier is that businesses, people who are business minded, people who have come to blockchain, and most of us have come to blockchain from other industries, are facing a real challenge in being asked to cooperate in a way that they aren't used to in the business world. So blockchain technology provides for and sometimes requires a lot more cooperation than this competitive, very capitalistic, profit maximizing mindset is really used to. So a lot of disruption just in spending a couple seconds to think about what is decentralization really starts to disrupt our traditional models of building businesses. And I hope that people in the industry will take it seriously. So then moving on to disintermediation, we talk about it all the time in blockchain. Oh, we're getting rid of a third party. You don't have a third party anymore. You don't have to trust anyone anymore. And so what I think that you're saying is it allows us to operate with people outside of this public-private distinction. It's an ethical relationship of how I interact with you one-on-one. I guess I didn't really have an exact question for that, but
yeah, I mean, I have some thoughts on that. You find that there's a kind of libertarian take on the notion of decentralization and open permissionless networks that has its roots in kind of like the philosophy of Ayn Rand, right? And the sort of like pushed value there, or the sort of line which tries to argue that why we should value that is because it like maximizes individual freedom, right? You can sort of come and go as you please, and sort of individuals are sort of free to do what they want. You know, they're not sort of being barred from their own sort of individual expression and actions by you know, like the power that rests in the hands of the few or something like that. But it seems like even though that's a sort of integral part of the story for you, you wanted to actually, in a way, invert the sort of emphasis. And by that, I mean this. It's about maximizing individual freedom, but not in an atomistic way, because as you put it, you know, like society isn't just like a sort of aggregation of a bunch of individuals, right? As if they sort of like the sort of ontology of a person is first you, and then the ontology of a society is you and then all these other people, right? And then you get up to this level at which the society exists. No, it's actually kind of the other way around, right? Sort of I am because we are type of thing. So what I'm getting at here is that although sort of maximizing individual freedom is an integral part of the story for you, you wanted to lay the emphasis on how it's really more about not restricting pathways for cooperation, right? And so this leads me to a question which is, I guess, more or less perennial. So it's sort of fair if, you know, we don't get to the bottom of it here, but it's this trope that goes all the way back even to Plato, where the question becomes, why value democracy, right? Why value networks that allow for, open, free pathways for mass cooperation and communication to sort of like dictate the sort of movement of social decisions and whatnot? Why value democracy understood in that way when it's very likely that the sort of masses don't know a lot? They don't know what's in their best interest, right? So what I'm getting at here is, it seems like there might be a case to be made. I'm not going to make it, but I'm just sort of thinking of a hypothetical interlocutor here that would say, well, there's at least one view of what the good is, which says it's ensured by benevolent dictatorship. Yeah. So how do we know that this type of system is the kind of democracy that is ultimately valuable, when it might turn out to be the case that the right kind of centralized network is actually what's going to ensure the good? And I get that this is the sort of debate that goes on between the sort of, socialist and capitalist mindsets, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, does your view there presuppose that what's sort of valuable above all is like the preservation of the sort of individual's right to express themselves through cooperation, and so it, like, those pathways shouldn't be barred? I know there's a lot in there, but it was
no, it's okay. I try. Thank you. It's very interesting what you say. I try to answer the question or these ideas, or to commentate the ideas. I will say the real challenge here is how to think individuals, or how to think community. So how to think individual without thinking of it like an atom, like a monad, as Leibniz said, and how to think community without thinking of it as a totality or a uniform mass where there is no individual. So that's the challenge. And I think the idea is to think paradoxically. And that is very difficult for us because we are used to this law of thought, of a logical system of thinking, which where identity and logical principle are the most important, and it's very difficult to think paradoxically. So that's the first. And what you're saying about democracy is, I think that is also this idea of or this question of how to think the community, how to think that we are living together, and how is this process of living together, how is the governance, how is order, and that is the question. And I think that it's not just, I think that the good for the Commonwealth is not at the end, but it's sort of at the beginning. So in this living side by side with the others, there is a first form of well and good, and that is the concerning of the other. So I think for me the beginning of this thinking how we live side by side with others begins or starts with this idea of originary form of good, that is to be concerned and to be responsible for the other. That is the base, I will say. That is the foundation. It's because we are used to think all the contrary. We think that the other are the enemy, and etc. And that mindset determine our form of understand democracy, politics, economy, etc. And that's the problem. I think that it's not that easy to say what is this good, this primary form, originary form of good, but it's just to be concerned for the other. And it's not that hard also to think about that. I'm thinking in this in friendship, or in also parenthood, or I don't know, family, and this form of societal, this form of living that are not so that strange. But there were, for example, friendship were excluded from political thinking. And I think that is a challenge also, to thinking again in friendship and fraternity and brotherhood, I don't know, as a primary form of living together.
Yeah, so
I remember,
yeah,
I remember Edward Snowden speaking of a kind of fraternity at the beginning, or in between, or in humanity. He says we are not enemies from each other, China, or I don't know, in the internet. There, that was a TED talk, an interview, and he said there is a kind of fraternity, and that is the question. And I think that the most important is to maintain the question: is that possible? I think that just maintaining the question means another form, or interact with each other, or to build industry, to build business. If you maintain that question, everything is different.
So so the notion of the good originates in a consideration for the other. So open pathways, open permissionless networks are not good in virtue of their allowing the individual to express themselves, but it's because it allows the individual to act freely on the basis of their primary consideration for the other. So it's sort of that model preserves goodness, because, right, it's just a fact that only I am responsible for my own actions. But me acting freely preserves the good, not because I'm able to act freely, but because I'm able to act freely by considering, or on the basis of my consideration for others. So it's to say that, look, maybe it's true that an argument can be made that democracy is no good because the masses just don't know what's good in general. That's not sort of that fact alone, that the masses may not know what's really in their best interest, isn't sort of a counterexample to the claim that democracy can ensure goodness, right? It just means that we have to try better to sort of work, not, I guess, in the service of the other, because, right, that's like, this is the kind of thing that the sort of Randian line of thought wants to, right? It said, oh, Kant was just, pushing a moral philosophy that was just far too altruistic and it's not realistic. Oh, this is how you get, Soviet Russia. Everyone thinks they have to just, hand their peanut butter and jelly sandwich over to the other because that's their duty. No, I don't mean it in that sense. I just mean it to say that sort of there is something that ensures like your flourishing as a human being when you act on, like, when you consider other people too, right? So it's like you can ensure your own flourishing and sort of goodness in general by being able to freely act on the basis of a consideration for others.
Yeah. Also, I think that that is so regarding freedom. I think I prefer always to think in terms of options. And I think that the very important of this new technology is the actual plurality that it fosters. So is, for example, in cryptocurrencies, it's exciting that there's so much tokens and forms of cryptocurrencies. And I think that that is very valuable, as it's very important. So a constellation, an ecosystem, a plural ecosystem of an unimaginable quantity of forms of tokens and cryptocurrency. That is so important. And that come with that, we have more options. We can say we have more freedom. And I think that that is remarkable from this new technology, and that is the possibilities lies there. The possibility of have a lot of forms of governance, a lot of form of cryptocurrencies. I think that we can start thinking in other forms of economy, of other forms of democracy, or I don't know, of governance. We don't need anymore to talk just about democracy. We can use another names. I don't know. We have to imagine that, but we can think, or we can imagine new forms of economy, new forms of society, new forms of democracy or governance, and that is very, very interesting from this new technology. The plurality, the diversity, the different options.
Yeah, that kind of brings us to the last point of your talk, which I want to make sure we go over before we run out of time.
Yeah.
But the new possibilities and the new ways of relating with other people that blockchain technology can provide, which is not just a transfer of information, but of creating new categories, new relationships, a reality machine, not reality creating machine, not just a truth verifying machine. Which is my favorite part of the talk, because I did also read Blockchain in the Future of Everything, the Truth Machine book, when I first started working in blockchain, and yeah, I just love that this idea in philosophy as well, that you can think of a blockchain transaction as a speech act, but as many philosophers have come before and said, that a lot of times when we perform a speech act, we're not just transmitting information or saying that a proposition is true or not. We're actually doing something. We're creating a new reality. So, with some execution of a smart contract, with some transaction on the blockchain, you're not only verifying that something occurred, that thing that occurred is a new reality, right? I own this, or you gave me your house. Yeah. My house exists as a tokenized asset on the blockchain.
Yeah, or a marriage.
Yeah, definitely.
That is. Yeah, that is a contract. When you sign a contract, it's not just data or information. It's something happened, and that is new. We can think we can think of marriage, of birth, baptism. When you name something, when you are doing something and you're creating something new. And I think that blockchain is this expression. It's the technological expression of this creative power of language, human language. That is because language is not just a system to reflect, like in a mirror, reality. It's not that every word is linked to a certain entity in reality, but words are the world, are our reality. So saying something is to sort of creating new things in the world. And that is, for me, also the very important situation with this new technology. That when we meet in virtual and when we meet online, transacting with this new technology, that comes something new. This creative power is very exciting for me. That is very interesting.
Very exciting for me too. And I'm really happy to know that there's philosophers like yourself thinking about these problems, which I think are very important. These things to keep in mind as you're building a company, as you're building a technology, thinking about what kind of world are we creating when we create this technology? Is it going to be something that preserves the individual but allows for cooperation? Is it something that's going to enhance our ethical relations to each other or not? Are we being very thoughtful and careful of these new realities that we're creating? And so I hope people will tune into this talk, and if they want to reach out to you and learn more about what you're researching, how can they find you?
So I'm in Twitter and LinkedIn, and also my email address is my name, Federico@protonmail.com.
Awesome.
So I'm glad to answer questions or to just meet other people.
And if you're a philosopher and also working in blockchain technology, we'd love to get to know you. Please check us out at www.blockchainphilosophers.com. We're working on some blockchain and philosophy courses in the back end and having conversations like this all the time. So we'd love to meet you and learn what you guys are working on. So thanks everyone for joining. It's Ashley Meredith from MouseBelt and Tyler as well.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Federico. It's fun.
Thank you, guys.
And now back to Reimagine 2020.
Bye-bye.